beyond the boundaries of reality, where imagination weaves dreams into existence. Welcome to Storylight. The city of Alamar had always been a place of mystique, where the whispers of magic danced in the wind, and the stars seemed a little closer to the earth than anywhere else. Nestled along the edges of a vast forest, Alamar was a haven for those who believed in the old tales. Tales of ancient forces, hidden realms, and the unbreakable bond between the sky and the earth. But for 21-year-old Mela, these were nothing more than stories to pass the time. She worked as an apprentice in the town's small apothecary, her hands stained with herbs and potions. Her life was one of routine. She had little interest in the magical tales that filled the books she had been forced to study as a child. She was practical, grounded, and yet, everything changed the moment she found the letter. It was tucked away behind a stack of faded scrolls in the apothecary's dusty storage room. The letter was sealed with wax, the emblem embossed with a crescent moon, a symbol she had never seen before. Curious, Mela opened it. The words written in an elegant script that seemed to shimmer slightly in the dim light. Mela, the time has come for you to embrace what you are. The moon calls you. Tonight, when the moon is full, walk to the forest's edge, and the path will find you. Trust in the stars and the ancient bonds. The world needs you. The letter ended abruptly, leaving Mela with more questions than answers. But something stirred within her, a sense of urgency, a pull she couldn't ignore. As the evening sun began to set, casting a golden glow over Alamar, Mela found herself standing at the forest's edge. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the leaves rustled in a breeze that felt almost too purposeful, as though they were calling to her. It was almost time. Her heart raced, her breath shallow as the first light of the full moon began to peek through the branches above. She had no idea why she had come or what she expected to find, but she had an undeniable urge to walk into the woods. The letter had said the path would find her. Taking a deep breath, Mela stepped forward. As she moved deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to part before her, opening up to reveal a narrow, winding path bathed in silvery moonlight. The air grew colder, and the forest grew quieter. The usual sounds of night creatures muted as though the forest itself was holding its breath. She followed the path, her feet moving on their own, her mind overwhelmed with the strangeness of the moment. Soon, she arrived at a clearing, where a towering stone structure stood at the center. An ancient obelisk, its surface covered in glowing symbols. The symbols pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. Mela stepped closer, her fingers grazing the stone. The moment she touched it, the world around her seemed to shift. The stars above twinkled with a newfound brilliance, and the ground beneath her feet vibrated with an ancient energy. A voice, deep and soothing, echoed in her mind. You have arrived, Mela. The moon has called you. Welcome to the realm of Celestia. Mela's surroundings seemed to blur as the world around her spun into a new reality. The forest was gone, replaced by a vast, glowing expanse of starlit sky. The ground beneath her feet shimmered like liquid silver, and floating islands dotted the horizon, bathed in the soft glow of distant moons. She gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. This was no ordinary dream, this was real. Where am I? She whispered, her voice trembling. You are in Celestia, the voice answered, its presence calming her. A figure materialized before her, clothed in flowing robes that seemed woven from the stars themselves. He was tall, his features sharp and otherworldly, his eyes glowing with a pale light. You are the one we have waited for, he continued, his voice deep and resonant. I am Arindor, guardian of the celestial realm. The moon has chosen you to protect the balance between our world and the world of mortals. Mela stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. Protect the balance. I don't understand. Erindor's expression softened. You have lived among mortals, Mela. But you are not one of them. You are the last of the Moonborn, descendants of the ancient union between the stars and the earth. You are destined to maintain the equilibrium between the two worlds. Mela's mind spun. This couldn't be real. She was just a simple apothecary. She had no power, no knowledge of magic. But Erindor continued, his eyes filled with unspoken truth. The moon calls to you because the balance is shifting. Darkness is rising. And the forces that once protected the realms are weakening. The Moonborn are the only ones who can restore harmony. Mela didn't know how long she stood there, trying to process everything. The idea that she was meant to save two worlds, that she held the power to shape their fate, seemed impossible. But Erindor was patient. He told her of the ancient prophecy, the tale of the Moonborn, who were born under the full moon and carried the power of both earth and sky. Their duty was to protect the realm of Celestia from forces that sought to corrupt it, and to ensure that the boundaries between the worlds remained intact. You have the power within you, Mela, he said gently. The moon's embrace has awoken it. But you must learn to control it, or both our worlds will fall into darkness. Mela looked down at her hands, now glowing with a soft, ethereal light. The moon's energy pulsed within her, and she could feel its power, not as a burden, but as a calling. I will help you, Erindor said. There is much to learn. But first, we must prepare. The darkness comes faster than we thought. In the days that followed, Mela trained with Erindor, learning how to harness the moon's power within her. She learned to weave light, to call upon the stars, and to shape the very fabric of the world around her. But darkness was never far behind. Strange creatures began to appear at the edges of Celestia. Shadowy figures that seemed to come from the depths of nightmare. One evening, as Mela stood on a cliff overlooking the starlit expanse, Erindor joined her. They are closer now, he said, his voice grave. The first test will come soon. You must be ready. Mela nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of the task ahead. She had never asked for this, but the moon had chosen her, and she would not turn away. The battle for Celestia, and for the balance of all worlds, was about to begin. And Mela would fight, not just for Celestia, but for the world she had left behind. The moon hung high in the night sky, casting its pale light across the floating islands of Celestia. Mela stood in the center of the training grounds, her heart pounding in her chest. Erindor had informed her that the time had come for her first true test. But she was still unsure. She had only just begun to harness her power, and the weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon her. Her hand tingled with the faint glow of moonlight, an energy she had learned to summon. Erindor stood beside her, his expression unreadable. This test will measure your strength, Mela, he said quietly. You will face the darkness that threatens to consume our world. But you must remember, this is only the beginning. Before Mela could respond, the air around them shifted. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and a swirling mist began to form at the far edge of the clearing. The darkness had come. From within the mist, shadowy figures began to emerge. Twisted creatures with eyes like burning coals, their forms shifting like liquid shadows. They were the first wave. Dark entities that had escaped the void. A realm between worlds where the forces of destruction slumbered. Mela's heart raced. She had never faced anything like this before. But she had no choice. She raised her hands, summoning the moon's energy to her. The pale light surrounded her, forming a protective barrier, But it wasn't enough. The creatures lunged, their fangs gleaming in the moonlight. Mela thrust her palms forward, and a burst of light shot from her fingertips, sending the creatures skittering back. But there were too many. The darkness seemed endless, their numbers growing by the second. Erindor's voice broke through the chaos. Focus. Mela. You must connect with the power of the moon. You are its channel, its chosen vessel. Let the stars guide you. Mela closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She reached for the moon within her, feeling its pulse, steady, calming, infinite. Her connection deepened, and the world around her seemed to slow. The creatures, though fierce, were only shadows. With a shout, she unleashed the full force of the moon's power, sending a wave of energy that shattered the darkness in an explosion of light. The creatures screeched, fading back into the mist, their forms dissipating like smoke. Mela fell to her knees, exhausted but victorious. The ground was littered with remnants of the battle, glowing fragments of the creature's essence, now scattered like stardust. Erindor stepped forward, his eyes filled with pride. You have done well, Mela, he said. You are ready. But remember, this is only the first of many trials. Days passed, and Mela's strength continued to grow. Erindor guided her through more tests, each one more difficult than the last. She learned to control the moon's energy with precision, to summon its light to heal and to fight. But as the days wore on, the threat of the darkness loomed larger. Erindor spoke of an ancient prophecy, one that foretold the coming of a great war between light and shadow. Mela had hoped that she could stop the darkness from spreading. But it was clear now that this was a battle that would span generations. One evening, as Mela and Erindor stood at the edge of the floating islands, gazing up at the stars, Erindor spoke of the prophecy in more detail. The stars are our guides, he said, his voice thoughtful. But the prophecy speaks of a key that lies hidden among the constellations. Only the one who can decipher the riddle of the stars can unlock the power of the key and end the war. You, Mela, must find it. Mela's brow furrowed. A key in the stars? How can I possibly find it? Quote. Erindor smiled faintly. You will find the answer in the patterns, Mela. The stars do not speak in words, but in signs. You must learn to listen, to see beyond the surface. As they stood in silence, Mela focused on the sky. The stars were impossibly bright, their light dancing in patterns she had never noticed before. Each star seemed to carry its own rhythm, its own pulse. Suddenly, she understood. A pattern emerged before her eyes, like a map written in the heavens. A constellation, faint but unmistakable, appeared in the space between two familiar stars. It was the shape of a crescent moon, its tip pointed toward the horizon. That's it, Mela whispered, her heart racing. The key. It's in the shape of the moon. Erindor nodded. Well done, Mela. Now, we must find the location where the key lies hidden. The journey to the heart of Celestia was not a simple one. It was a place of legends, said to be the birthplace of the moon itself, where time and space intertwined like a cosmic dance. Mela and Erindor ventured through realms beyond Celestia, realms that existed on the edges of reality. Each world they passed through was more strange and wondrous than the last. They encountered ancient beings who lived among the stars, beings who spoke in riddles and were as old as the universe itself. With each step, Mela felt herself growing stronger, more attuned to the moon's power. But she also felt the darkness closing in. The creatures of the void were relentless, and their presence grew more oppressive with every passing day. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they arrived at the heart of Celestia. It was a place of infinite beauty, An ethereal lake surrounded by glowing trees that shimmered with the light of the stars. In the center of the lake was a small island, where a stone altar stood, bathed in the light of the full moon. "There," Erinda said, pointing to the altar. "The key lies within the altar's stone. But to claim it, you must face your greatest trial yet." Mela stepped forward, her heart steady, her mind focused. The final challenge awaited her. As Mela stepped onto the island, the air grew thick with a palpable energy, as though the very ground beneath her feet was alive. The moon hung directly above her, casting its silver light upon the stone altar that stood at the center of the island. Erindor had warned her that the trial would test her deepest fears and insecurities. But Mela had no idea what to expect. The stones of the altar were smooth and cold, each one etched with intricate markings that shimmered in the moonlight. In the center of the altar, a deep indentation awaited something only Mela could place within it. Mela took a step closer, her heart racing. As she reached out to touch the altar, a low, guttural voice echoed through the air, sending chills down her spine. "Mela," the voice whispered, "you've come this far, but are you truly ready for what lies ahead?" Quote. A shadowy figure materialized before her, its form indistinct and shifting, a dark cloud of swirling mist. It spoke again, its voice both familiar and alien. "You carry the weight of two worlds, and yet you still have doubts. Do you have the strength to wield the moon's power, knowing the consequences of your actions?" Quote. Mela stepped back, her hands trembling. She had never felt so vulnerable, so exposed. The shadow seemed to grow larger, its presence overwhelming. She began, but her voice caught in her throat. The figure in front of her seemed to leer, its glowing eyes piercing through her defenses. "You carry the blood of the moonborn, Mela," it taunted. "You are meant to be a savior. But what if you are the cause of the destruction? What if you fail, and everything you fought for crumbles into dust?" Quote. The darkness pressed in on her, suffocating, drowning her in doubt. She felt her resolve begin to falter. Was she truly capable of saving Celestia? Of protecting her world from the darkness that threatened to consume it? The shadow circled her, growing more menacing. "You fear your own power," it said, its voice low and mocking. "You fear what you will become? What if you're just like them? The very darkness you seek to destroy?" Quote. Mela's breath came in shallow gasps. She felt trapped, cornered by her own fears, by the doubt that now swirled in her heart. But then, in the deepest recesses of her soul, something stirred. A quiet voice, her own voice, whispered to her, "You are not your fears. You are the moon's light. You are its strength, its promise." It was a fleeting thought, but it gave her the strength to look up at the shadow once more. "No," she said, her voice steady, "I am not my fear. I am the moonborn, and I will not let darkness consume my world." The shadow hesitated for a moment, as if surprised by the sudden surge of defiance. Then, with a snarl, it lunged toward her, its form twisting into a writhing mass of blackness. Mela raised her hands, calling upon the moon's power once more. This time, she did not summon it as a weapon. Instead, she embraced it as a part of her. She became the light. The darkness recoiled as her hands glowed with the full force of the moon. The energy around her intensified. A burst of radiant light that sent the shadow shrieking into the night. The mist cleared, and the figure dissolved into nothingness. Mela stood, panting, her body trembling with exhaustion. But she had done it. She had faced the darkness within her, and emerged victorious. The altar before her began to glow with a soft, ethereal light. The indentation at its center shifted. and the stone slowly rose to reveal an intricate silver key, its shape perfectly resembling the crescent moon she had seen in the stars. With trembling hands, Mela took the key, feeling its power course through her. Erindor stepped forward, his face filled with pride. "You have passed the trial, Mela. The key is yours." Mela held the key close to her chest, feeling its warmth seep into her very being. But the victory felt bittersweet. The darkness had not been fully defeated, only driven back, for now. "The key is only the beginning," Erindor said, his voice grave. "It is the key to a greater power. One that will help you stand against the forces that threaten both Celestia and your world. But remember, Mela, the battle is far from over. The war between light and dark has only just begun." Mela nodded, her resolve hardening once more. The journey was not yet complete. She had faced the shadows within herself, and now she would face the darkness that threatened to consume all worlds. Together, she and Erindor returned to the heart of Celestia, where the next chapter of their journey awaited them. As the days passed, Mela's understanding of her role in the celestial war deepened. She and Erindor traveled across Celestia, seeking the wisdom of the ancient beings who had once lived in harmony with the stars. The key she had claimed was only the first of many steps in the prophecy, and the path to restoring balance was unclear. But Mela had learned one crucial thing: she could not fight this battle alone. The realms were vast, and the forces of darkness were numerous. The moon's power within her was great, but it would take more than just her strength to save the world. As they journeyed toward the heart of the prophecy, Mela couldn't help but wonder what role the moon would play in this war. Would it be her guiding light, or would it become the very thing that condemned her? In the distance, the stars twinkled, as though waiting for her answer. And deep within her heart, Mela knew, the time had come to face her destiny. Mela and Erindor's journey took them across the windswept cliffs of Celestia, to the floating citadels that stretched high into the sky. Each step Mela took felt heavier, burdened by the weight of her destiny. But with each passing day, her connection to the moon and its ancient power grew stronger. The celestial realm was vast, filled with beings of unimaginable power. Some of them had long forgotten their ties to the moon, while others had never known them at all. But Mela's mission was clear. She had to unite them all against the growing darkness that threatened not just Celestia, but all the worlds. In one of the floating citadels, Mela and Erindor met with a group of ancient guardians known as the Starborn. They were protectors of the celestial realms, beings of pure light whose power rivaled the sun itself. Yet even they were wary of the growing shadow that had begun to seep into their world. "The darkness moves swiftly," said their leader, a tall figure with eyes that gleamed like the stars. "We have felt its reach even here, in the heart of Celestia. And we have seen the prophecy. Mela, you are the one who will either save or doom us all." Mela took a deep breath, her resolve steady. "I will not let the darkness win. I will stop it, no matter the cost." The Starborn exchanged uneasy glances, but their leader nodded. "Then you must travel to the heart of the abyss," he said softly. "It is the place where the darkness was born, where it first seeped into the realms. It is also where the key to ending the war lies. But it is a dangerous journey, filled with trials and horrors beyond your comprehension." Mela's heart clenched at the thought of facing the abyss. The heart of the abyss was a place whispered about in legends, a realm of endless night and despair. It was said that those who entered never returned, consumed by the shadows that lurked there. But she had no choice. The fate of all worlds rested on her shoulders. With the Starborn's blessing, Mela and Erindor set off toward the abyss. The journey was long and treacherous, taking them through realms where the laws of nature were twisted and bent. They crossed vast deserts of ash, sailed through oceans of frozen starlight, and walked through forests of trees that whispered secrets older than the stars themselves. Each challenge tested Mela in new ways, forcing her to confront her deepest fears, her doubts, and her own inner darkness. But with Arinda by her side, she found the strength to press on. She had a purpose now, something far greater than herself. Finally, after weeks of travel, they arrived at the entrance to the abyss. It was a massive rift in the fabric of space, a tear in the very sky that seemed to stretch on forever. From within, a cold, suffocating darkness spilled out, swirling like a storm. Be prepared, Mela, Arinda warned. The abyss is not a place of physical danger. It is a place of the mind. It will test you, tempt you, and try to break you. Only those who are strong in heart can survive. Mela nodded, her hand clutching the moonstone key that hung from her neck. I'm ready, she said, her voice unwavering. They stepped into the abyss, and the darkness consumed them whole. The moment they entered the abyss, the air grew thick and heavy, and Mela felt a coldness seep into her very soul. She could hear whispers, faint voices echoing in the distance, like ghosts from the past. The path ahead was obscured, and the ground beneath them seemed to shift, constantly changing. A figure appeared before them, a dark silhouette, tall and imposing. It was a shadowy figure, its face hidden in a cloak of darkness. But Mela could feel its power radiating from it. You have come to the heart of the abyss. The figure spoke in a voice like 1,000 voices, whispering in unison. But you are not the first to come here seeking the truth. Many have entered, but none have returned. Do you think you can succeed where they failed? Quote. Mela's heart pounded in her chest, but she stepped forward, her hand steady on the moonstone key. I will succeed, she said, her voice resolute. I carry the light of the moon, and I will not let it be extinguished. The figure let out a dark laugh, its form swirling and shifting like a black storm. Very well. If you wish to prove your strength, you must face the trials of the abyss. Each trial will test a different part of your being, your mind, your heart, and your soul. Only if you pass all three will you be granted the knowledge to end the war. Without another word, the figure vanished, and the darkness around them deepened. Mela and Arinda were plunged into an overwhelming silence. The first trial began immediately. The first trial was a test of the mind. The ground beneath them shifted once again, and they found themselves standing at the edge of a vast, swirling abyss, an endless expanse of nothingness. Before them, a mirror appeared, its surface shimmering with a light that was both familiar and alien. In the mirror, Mela saw herself, only, the reflection was distorted, twisted. It was a version of her filled with doubt, fear, and anger. Her eyes glowed red, and her face was a mask of despair. You cannot save them, the reflection said, its voice an echo of her own. You cannot even save yourself. You are weak. You will fail. Mela's hands clenched into fists. No, she whispered. I am not weak. I am the Moonborn. I will not let this darkness consume me. But the reflection's words echoed in her mind, planting seeds of doubt. Look around you, it taunted. All your friends, all your allies, they will fall. You cannot protect them all. Mela's heart twisted in pain as she thought of Arinda and the others who had joined her on this journey. Could she really protect them all? Would she fail them? But just as she was about to break, a surge of light flooded her mind. It was the moon's energy, gentle but unwavering. The reflection in the mirror shattered, and the darkness around her began to recede. I am not alone, Mela said, her voice strong. The moon is with me, and so are those who believe in me. I will not be defeated by doubt. The mirror shattered completely, and the first trial was over. With the first trial behind her, Mela felt a brief moment of relief, but it was short-lived. As the mirror shattered, the darkness around her seemed to grow even more oppressive. Her mind raced, but she knew the trials would only get harder. Erinder stood at her side, his face a mask of calm, though she could feel his unease. The second trial had begun, and this time, the darkness shifted. It wasn't just a physical presence anymore. It had become a feeling, an emotion. Without warning, the surroundings transformed. The swirling blackness parted to reveal a sunlit meadow, peaceful and serene. Mela blinked in confusion as the soft sound of birdsong filled the air. She could feel the warmth of the sun on her face, smell the fresh grass beneath her feet. But something felt off. In the distance, she saw a figure, someone she recognized. It was her mother, standing at the edge of the meadow, a smile on her face. "Mela," her mother called, "come to me. I've missed you. We can finally be together again." Her heart ached at the sight, and for a moment, she was lost in the image. It had been years since her mother had passed, and the pain of that loss had never truly faded. But then, a voice whispered in her ear, cold and sharp. "This is not real. This is a trick. The abyss is playing on your heart. Do not be fooled." Mela hesitated, torn between the longing for her mother's embrace and the knowledge that this could not be true. She took a cautious step forward, but as she did, the meadow began to fade. The sound of birdsong grew distorted, and the ground beneath her feet cracked. Her mother's face twisted, her smile replaced by a sorrowful frown. "Why did you leave me?" Her mother's voice echoed, full of pain. "Why couldn't you save me?" Quote, the guilt that Mela had buried deep inside her resurfaced, threatening to swallow her whole. The weight of the past, of her mother's death, pressed down on her like a boulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. But then, in the midst of the darkness, she heard another voice. Erinder's voice. Steady and unwavering. "Mela, you are not responsible for her death. You cannot change the past. But you can shape the future. Do not let the shadows of your past dictate your actions." With those words, the illusion began to dissolve, and the meadow vanished. The guilt that had gripped her heart began to loosen, and the darkness around her receded slightly. Mela took a deep breath, her heart still heavy but stronger now. "I will not let the past define me," she whispered to herself. "I will not be trapped by the shadows of my heart." And with that, the second trial was over. The third trial came swiftly. This time, there were no illusions, no familiar faces to deceive her. The darkness itself seemed to be alive, wrapping itself around her, pressing in from all sides. She could feel the weight of the moonstone key against her chest, its power pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. But even with that power, the darkness felt overwhelming. It wasn't like the other trials. This time, it wasn't just her mind or heart that was being tested. It was her very soul. The air thickened, and Mela found herself standing at the edge of a vast chasm. A rift in reality itself. At the bottom, she could see swirling shadows, forms that seemed to twist and writhe as though alive. The chasm was bottomless, stretching endlessly into the void. "You will never escape this place," a voice boomed, reverberating through the abyss. "It is your fate to fall into the darkness. You are not strong enough to face it." Mela's knees trembled as she stared down into the abyss. The voice echoed her deepest fears. The doubt that had haunted her since the beginning of this journey. The weight of responsibility. The fear of failure. The terror that she might not be able to save her world. It all threatened to consume her. But then, the moonstone key flared to life. A soft, silvery glow radiated from it, pushing back against the oppressive darkness. Mela stepped forward, despite the fear clawing at her. You cannot stop me, the voice sneered. You cannot win. You are weak. You are destined to fall. Mela's gaze never wavered from the void. I am not weak, she said, her voice steady. I carry the light of the moon, and with it, I can face anything. With a surge of strength, she stepped forward again, feeling the energy of the moonstone key coursing through her. The darkness recoiled, but the chasm remained. You are not alone, Erinda's voice echoed in her mind. Trust in the strength of those who stand by your side. You do not carry this burden alone. Mela took a deep breath and stepped into the void. The world around her twisted, but she did not falter. The darkness reached for her, but she pressed forward, the light of the moon guiding her path. The darkness screamed as she moved through it, but it was powerless against her. She felt herself growing stronger, her soul in alignment with the power of the moon. And then, suddenly, the darkness broke. The chasm began to crumble, the shadows dissolving into nothingness. The abyss faded, leaving Mela standing in a field of starlight. The trial was over. With the trials behind her, Mela felt a sense of clarity she hadn't known before. She had faced the darkness in her mind, heart, and soul, and she had emerged stronger for it. As she stepped forward, Erinda by her side, the world around them began to shift once more. They found themselves standing at the very center of the abyss, where the darkness had been born. It was a place unlike any they had encountered before. A realm of swirling light and shadow. An ever-changing landscape of contradictions. At the center stood an ancient, crumbling structure, half hidden in the shadows. The heart of the abyss. Mela, Erinda said softly. This is where it all began. The birthplace of the darkness that threatens all worlds. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Now, you must face the final test. You must unlock the truth hidden within this place. Mela nodded, her heart steady. The end of her journey was near. She stepped forward, the moonstone key in hand, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The moment Mela approached the heart of the abyss, the air grew thick with an almost palpable tension. She could feel the dark energy that permeated the very fabric of the realm, twisting and warping the space around her. It was the heart of all the shadows, the birthplace of every nightmare she had ever encountered. As she drew closer to the crumbling structure at the center of the abyss, she could see its true form. A massive stone edifice, ancient and worn, carved with symbols that pulsed with dark energy. At the center of the structure was a massive, blackened crystal, glowing with an eerie light. This, Mela knew, was the source of the darkness that had infected the realms. Erinda stood by her side, his gaze fixed on the crystal. This is it, Mela. The source of everything. If we destroy it, the darkness will be undone. But if you fail, quote. His voice trailed off, leaving the implication hanging heavy in the air. Mela nodded, her heart racing, but she was resolute. She had come this far, and she would not fail now. With the moonstone key in hand, she stepped forward. As soon as she touched the crystal's surface, the entire structure seemed to shudder. A low, deep hum filled the air, reverberating through Mela's bones. The darkness that surrounded the crystal seemed to pulse with life, reaching out toward her. Do you think you can undo what has been done? A voice echoed from the shadows. It was not Erinda's voice, nor any other voice Mela recognized. It was the voice of the darkness itself. A deep, menacing growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. You cannot defeat me, child, the voice continued. I am eternal. I am the darkness that was born before the stars. The void that has existed since the beginning of time. I cannot be undone. Mela gripped the moonstone key tighter, feeling its warmth spread through her. She could feel the power of the moon radiating from it, filling her with strength. She was not afraid. "I am not alone," Mela whispered, her voice steady and unshaken. "I carry the light of the moon, the strength of my allies, and the hope of all the worlds. You are nothing compared to that." As she spoke, the darkness seemed to recoil, as if her words had weight, had power. The crystal before her began to pulse faster, brighter, its dark energy swirling and growing more unstable. "You cannot stop me," the voice screeched, louder now, a fury building within it. But Mela's resolve only strengthened. With a final, determined motion, she plunged the moonstone key into the crystal. A blinding flash of light erupted from the crystal, engulfing her and Erindor in its brilliance. The sound of 1,000 screams filled the air. But Mela held her ground, her eyes fixed on the crystal. The light grew brighter, until it was all-consuming. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. When Mela opened her eyes, the world had changed. The abyss was gone. The twisted, dark landscape had been replaced by a serene, starlit sky. The air was calm, peaceful, like the night after a storm had passed. She stood at the heart of the abyss, where the crystal had once stood. But now there was nothing but an empty space. The darkness had been undone, its source vanquished. But Mela felt something else too, a quiet sense of loss. As though the darkness had been a part of her. A shadow she had carried within herself all this time. Erindor stood beside her, his face filled with awe. "Mela, you did it." She nodded slowly, but her gaze was distant. It was over. The war had ended. The darkness was no more. But there was still so much to rebuild, so much to heal. The realms would need time to recover, and so would she. "Where do we go from here?" Mela asked, her voice soft. Erindor smiled gently, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Wherever you lead us, Mela. We will rebuild together. The light of the moon will guide us, just as it has always done." She looked up at the stars, feeling a renewed sense of purpose fill her heart. The darkness had been defeated, but the work of rebuilding was just beginning. And with the moon by her side, she knew they could face anything. For Mela, the journey had been long, but it had only just begun. And together with her friends, her allies, and the strength of the moon, she would rebuild the world, one step at a time. Years passed, and the world slowly healed. The realms that had once been engulfed in darkness were now bathed in light, their skies clear and bright once more. The people rejoiced, and the lands flourished. Mela had become a symbol of hope, a beacon for all those who had once lived in fear. Erindor stood by her side, always a quiet presence, his love and loyalty unwavering. And though the memory of the abyss lingered in her heart, Mela knew that the darkness could never return. For she had not just defeated the darkness in the abyss. She had faced the darkness within herself and had emerged stronger. The moon, now fully restored, hung high in the sky. Its light a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope. And as long as the moon shone, Mela knew that the light would never fade. The story ends here. But countless others await in the vast expanse of imagination. Subscribe to Storylight for more journeys into the unknown. See you on the next adventure.